Welcome to Mooring Minders Magic, the barn finds of boating. I'm Spider, how are you? I've been involved in boats a long time and I've owned dozens of boats, cheap boats, expensive boats, and all along sort of good and bad. I've had sailing boats, I've had power boats, I've had kayaks, I've had rubber dinghies, all sorts, tinnies, the whole thing. I've worked in the industry for many years. I started working in marinas in 1979 in the United States, brought some skills back to Australia and did that for a number of years. I've worked in senior marketing roles, and in the last sort of 20 or 30 years I've worked in the media. I had a successful and very popular radio show called On the Water on Sydney's 2UE about 15 years ago. It was a lot of fun, but what it did was it exposed me to a lot of skills from other people and what they've learned, putting together with what I've learned about boats over the years. And I thought it was about time someone came up with a defence of the ugly, the unpopular, the orphan of a mooring minder. Now, a mooring minder in Australia is a colloquial term used for any boat, and I've got plenty of examples for you on this clip today. A mooring minder is a boat that generally just looks after a mooring and by the bare minimum qualifies that mooring to stay in the name of the person to whom the boat is registered. Now, boats in Sydney and New South Wales under maritime law here, where I'm based in Sydney, if their boat is missing off a mooring for 3 or 4 months without a reasonable excuse, like it's having a major overhaul or they're off cruising around the world or whatever, they're very likely to lose the rights to that mooring, which is controlled by the state government. And it's actually it's a privilege to have a mooring in Sydney or just about anywhere. It's not expensive for say a 26-foot boat like the one I'm on now. It's $880 Australian a year just for the mooring site, and then there's other costs that I'll go into a little bit later on. But the mooring minder is a loveless boat. It's generally covered in mould. It's got barnacles growing the size of your fist, and it's just about out of registration, or is out of registration, which does attract the ire of the authorities, because they don't want. Well, you're not allowed to have an unregistered boat on a mooring. And what happens is that people end up dropping the price of these boats when they go to sell them, if they're not going to use them or not going to do them up or whatever. They end up dropping the price of them until they virtually give them away for like $1 or whatever it might be. And I'm going to show you an example of something I picked up and the bargain that I got, and just a little bit of elbow grease and what you can actually do with what are referred to as a mooring minder. So you'll see lots of clips on YouTube, and look, I understand there's a lot of, it's almost like doomsday scrolling through, the other social media platforms, where people go through YouTube clips and go, oh, look out for this and look out for that and don't do this and be aware of that. And neuro-linguistic programming will tell you that all that does is put fear and dread into the minds of someone that's looking at getting into boating. And I'm here to flip that on its head. I'm not saying you go in with your eyes closed. I'm not saying there isn't risk, but what I am saying is that you can pick up a mooring minder very inexpensively for virtually nothing on Facebook Marketplace, for example, and you can turn that into a great little boat for coastal cruising or sailing or putting around the harbour, whatever it is that you might like to do. But the one bit of advice I want to give you before you dive in and have a look at what I've got to show you, and before you actually buy a boat that needs a fair bit of work, that just because it's inexpensive doesn't mean there won't be costs and work involved in it. If you're going to own a boat, particularly a boat that lives on the water, on a mooring or on a marina, it's got to be your thing. You can't sort of combine it with a whole lot of other activities in your life, particularly if you're working full time and you're not retired and haven't got tons of spare time. You've got to be prepared to make that your thing and look after it and get out onto the boat at least once a week to check it and to make sure it hasn't got water in it and to give it a nice clean. Let's go! So I have the Endeavour 26 in my wrap-up of boats. Now this one came with all this stuff here. The main sheet that controls the mainsail. It's got a lovely little 8 horsepower long shaft, so it goes down deep into the water through a well down there. or horsepower 4-stroke motor that runs beautifully. Fuel tank goes in there, engine stored there. Came with solar that works really, really well. It came with these 2 winches, the primary winches, which are the main ones on the boat that pull the headsail on, the front sail, the genoa or the jib or whatever it might be on your boat or another boat. Now, these are Harken 35 winches. They're worth about $1,200 each. Here's the other one. I've got them under cover now because I'm really looking after them. So you got solar, you got beautiful Harken winches. You got the clutches there for the halyards and the lines that operate the spinnaker pole, the uphaul, the topping lift they call that holds the spinnaker pole up, which is down below, and of course the halyards that pull the sails up the mast. So this one came with a very nice mainsail. It's in very good condition, physically in good condition, but it was very dirty and I had to spend a fair bit of time doing that up. That was no problem. It was just elbow grease. I can tell you that just about everything I've done on this is just elbow grease. No professional help, and I am not a shipwright, I'm not a professional. I just dug in and cleaned it all up. So virtually everything you see here, in terms of the hardware, the deck hardware, the solar, the engine, was all here. Now this particular boat has a headsail furler on it, which is fantastic. And I love this because I've got a bit of arthritis in the fingers, and lugging sails up on deck and hanking them on it's a bit of a punish, but this has got a lovely profile furler in good condition. So you can basically store the sail there and unfurl it and furl it up, and when things get a bit rough you can virtually any time change the size of the headsail depending on the conditions if it's very windy. And this little boat here was absolutely filthy. There were birds' nests on it, literally with birds on board, and I came on board for the first time when I bought it. I've almost bought it sight unseen. In fact, I bought this boat and I was standing on the deck right here talking to the owner, and I did the deal and paid with my phone there and then, and that person transferred the registration to me and away we went. Now, on the deck of this boat, I can promise you it didn't look like this. I have painted the foredeck and the cabin top with kiwi grip. Now, those of you that have had anything to do with boats and restoring or maintaining boats will know that kiwi grip's fantastic stuff. You basically apply it with a trowel or a small spatula or anything like that to get it across the area of the deck that you want the kiwi grip to be on. You mask it all up around the edges so it's nice and neat, and then you roll this bristly sort of roller, which is like a little cage on a roller across it, and it is fantastic. It looks fantastic, it looks great, and it's really non-skid. It's quite coarse. You can choose how coarse you want it by how much you use the roller on it. You can just give it a quick roll, and that's kiwi grip, and that's available from chandleries around the world, because I've seen YouTube clips where people have used those constantly, used kiwi grip constantly. And I'm not doing an ad for it, I don't get any special deal off them, I'm just recommending it as a boat owner. So now we come down below, and here it is. What a lovely interior. The windows are quite new, they're tinted Lexan, so they're in really good condition. They were all done, I didn't have to do that. There's plenty of storage on this boat. There's cupboards and there's lockers, and there's one of the quarter berths. It's about 7 foot long. You can just about put anyone in there. There's my awning. I put that awning together by buying an awning from a chandlery for about $110, and I bought these battens here from Bunnings, which is our big hardware chain, for about $4 each, and so that I can put that across the boom, and it goes, and I'll show you a photo of that, how it lies across the boom and offers protection to you in hot sunny weather so you don't get burned, or in cold rainy weather to keep the rain off you. So plenty of room and storage back there. There's the spinnaker pole that I referred to a little bit earlier, and this is one of the great features of this boat that I love. I absolutely love this, and that is this ice locker. It's got the insulated lid. So I've got the water there and a couple of cans. And honestly, you put a bag of ice in there, and in sort of moderate conditions, you know, when it's sort of 25 degrees outside, 26 during the day, that stays in there for 3 days. It is absolutely amazing. Nice little table. I've got some cleaning stuff on there at the moment that I'm going to use on the boat a little bit later. But it had mould right through it. I had to demould it, if you like. I just used exit mould, a sponge, opened everything up and let the air through, you know, because it was a bit ordinary, I can tell you. VHF radio, the solar going through a control box, all very neatly done. And this thing is got all the panels operating. It's got a voltmeter. It's got a USB charger here, which is great. So it's got everything you need. Storage there to get all that stuff you need in a hurry, like a torch and a knife and shackle keys and, most important, bottle opener. And then I'll take you into the forward cabin. And this is where the previous owner had the galley, which is basically the kitchen of a boat. And the stove just sits there. You can just buy those little butane stoves for about $30 and stick a can on it and job done. The fresh water works. It's in a tank underneath the berth here, and it's great. I store all my stuff. I use this as a storeroom. I've got no bunk cushions up here. And then you go out through the forehatch onto the deck, and that's the interior of my Endeavour 26. So here's the kicker. How much do you think I paid for this gorgeous little 26-foot boat? 5 grand, 7 grand, 10, 4, 3. I paid $500 Australian for this boat. That would be about 300 US dollars, not thousand, $500. They are available if you shop around and have a look. There's plenty available. On Facebook Marketplace, for example, I could point you to about 4 or 5 boats right now that are for sale for free, literally for $1. I think you have to pay something, so you pay $1 for it. And if you get hold of those and you put some work in, and your family love getting on the water, you're not going to let it just continue to rot and be covered in crap. It really is worth doing. Now, the budget on this thing is about $3,000 a year. Now, the $3,000 is made up of the maintenance on the mooring, right? So that tends to be about $500 or $600 because where I am, they're twin moorings. You've got a mooring up the front and one down the back here to keep all the boats in line in the bay. But most moorings are single moorings and the boat just swings freely on the single mooring. Now, the slipping and anti-foul in Sydney, it's quite expensive. There aren't many places to get it done where you can actually work on the boat yourself. I pulled this boat out at Woolwich Dock, and a 26-foot yacht for pulling it out, putting it back in, and they water blast it was $1,400. I add the anti-fouling to it, which was about $400, bits and pieces, you know, terps and rags and paintbrushes and the like, and I got out of that for around the $2 grand mark. If I'd got them to do it, it probably would have been $3,500, $4,000 at least. So I thought I'd rather have the cost of that labour in my pocket, which was great, and plus I've got a background in boats and I've done hundreds of anti-foulings of boats. Not that it's fun, but it is quite an easy thing to do if you know how. And how to anti-foul a yacht yourself will be coming up in future episodes. Here is the Gary Mould designed Santana 22, the little sister of the Santana 28. They're a fabulous little boat. I owned one of these in the early 80s. My father and mum built that boat in 1975, fitted it out, bought the hull and deck. They are a great little boat. You can get them from around $2 grand to about $5, maybe even a bit cheaper, but excellent boat. Highly recommended. The Santana 22 is a good twilight and club racer called the Adams 10. Very popular boat in the late 70s and 80s, and still racing as a fleet today up in Lake Macquarie and Middle Harbour Yacht Club in Sydney. They're like the Tartan 10 from the United States, but you can pick one of those up for about $5 grand. It's the Adams 10. Joe Adams, he designed some very fast boats, including the Hobart Line Honours winner Helsel and Helsel 2. The Adams 10. This little beauty is a Tasman 26. Now, another boat, the PR25, was actually built from one of these, or the moulds from these. This was the donor boat, that's the expression they use. But anyway, the Tasman 26 is a nice little cruiser racer, and you can pick those up quite inexpensively. And here is the Hood 23, aka the Sydney Harbour Holden. Hundreds of these were built from their conception in 1969-70, and they're a great little thing. They're actually fairly roomy. Now, they're a flush deck boat, which means they don't have a deck and then a cabin on top. The cabin is actually all under deck. They can be picked up for literally nothing. They're used widely as mooring minders. Very easy to handle, just 23 foot long. And yeah, I would say the price range realistically these days would go from literally $1 right through to, I don't know, probably 2,000 or 3,000. You might squeeze 4,000 out of them at a pinch. But yeah, the famous Hood 23. So this poor little darling is the 124, and they were a fairly popular boat in the 80s in Australia, and they were from a Geoff designed quarter-ton racing boat way back in the day. Now that's clearly a mooring minder. It needs a bit of love, but another example of a boat that you could easily pick up for virtually nothing and do up and get on the water. They've got 4 berths or so down below, and that would be outboard powered, so the outboard would hang on a bracket at the back. Here we have an absolutely beautiful example of a cruising version of one of my favourite boats. I've owned a couple of these. It's called the Etchells. They started life out in the mid-70s, actually trialling to be an Olympic class yacht. Fixed the keelboat yachts for the Olympics in the mid-70s. They lost out to the Soling, and they're designed by Skip Etchells, the late Skip Etchells, and they just had the World Championships in San Diego recently, and there were 77 boats, and it was won by an Australian, which was great news, with a fellow on the helm called Paul Kayard. And so this is in cruising mode. It's got the furling headsail. When I say cruising, you'd twilight on this. Do round the buoys on a Saturday or Sunday, and that's a beautiful example. Normally they have they don't have a furling headsail. They have a hanked-on headsail, but you could pick that thing up there for about $2,000 or $3,000. They're great things. The Etchells. Little mooring minder, the Boomerang 20. That's a trailer sailor. The rudder's not on there, but they're normally hung off the stern, and the centreboard is retracted through the middle of the boat, and they're pulled up on a trailer. So there is the Endeavour 24. Beautiful little thing. You could pick that up for almost nothing. Seriously, that's just about a mooring minder, and you could negotiate that for almost $1. And they're a great little thing to get on the harbour. The Endeavour 24, the little sister of the Endeavour 26. Compass 28, which is the older version of the Compass 29. Picked those up quite inexpensively too, from probably about 3,000 or 4,000 through to 10 at the most. They're lovely. They're just the older version of the Compass 29. Very pretty boat. Good little coastal cruiser. So here we have a centre cockpit version of the Adams 31, very popular in the 80s. Originally a half-ton IOR design. You might have heard me mention IOR, International Offshore Rule design, which was a formula by which a lot of boats raced, particularly in offshore and in the Sydney to Hobart, for example. So that's a centre cockpit. You've got a little private cabin down the back and 4 berths up front, diesel engine. Pick those up from about 12,000 to 30,000. And strangely enough, there's another version, another example of the centre cockpit version. And then we go all the way around here to the aft cockpit version of the same. So the cabin is forward like a conventional sloop yacht, and the cockpit is down aft. That's exactly the same hull as the other one that I just showed you. A terrific cruiser racer. You can just about go anywhere in one of those if it was well fitted out and all the rigging was checked and standing rigging replaced, which is the wire shrouds that hold the actual mast up. That's called standing rigging. They're a great boat, really nice boat. The Adams 31. So this little beauty is a Pacific 27. They started out life as a Westerly 26 in the 70s in Australia, and then Pacific Yachts started building them, and I think they must have added a foot onto the stern. They got nice overhangs there. But yeah, the Pacific 27, it's a good entry-level yacht, 5 berths down below, a diesel engine. Most of them had a diesel. What often happens with boats that have diesels, naturally they're sort of built with diesels, and they break down, is that they get rid of the motor, or they just forget about it, and they put an outboard bracket on the back to save thousands and thousands of dollars repairing or replacing the diesel engine. But yeah, the Pacific 27, you can pick those up for probably 3,000 or 4,000, through to about, I'd say no more than 10,000. Pacific 27. Now there's a nice little trailer sailor called the Fast 7500. Plenty of room, pop-top roof, so you can get the height in the cabin for headroom. They're easily trailed by a medium-sized car, and designed by Bruce Farr, famous yacht designer. Originally built in New Zealand. I think they were built in Australia, but you can pick one of those up somewhere between 6,000 and maybe 15,000 depending on the condition. But a really good thing if you don't want to have a boat that lives in the water. The Fast 7500. There's the Columbia 22. It's a lovely little boat, an American design. The Columbias were out here as 22s, as that is there. They were 27s and 34s, all very voluminous boats, good cruising boats, and you can pick one of those up for a couple of grand, very inexpensive, those things. It's the Columbia 22. And here is an example of a good Compass 29 in pretty good condition, this one. In fact, in very good condition. So a bit of elbow grease and some time on the scrubbing brush, and that's what you can end up with. Here's a great little racer cruiser, I'd call them, because they're a very quick little 26 foot or 8 meter cruiser racer. That one there is in sort of cruising mode with the furling headsail. It's called the S80, designed by Kim Swarbrick, and they sold a heap of these things. Now the interesting thing is, when you want to go cruising, they've got a pop top roof on the top of the cabin, and that pops up to give you the standing headroom that you require to have really comfortable cruising. They're very quick for a 25 footer. They used to class race a fair bit. They're really big in Perth, where the Swarbrick family are, and ran their business, Swarbrick Yachts. And you can pick these up very inexpensively. There's one for sale on Marketplace now for about $2,500. That's really cheap entry-level sailing, and they're good fun. Sprightly little thing, can be a handful, but the S80, I'd say somewhere on average between 2,000 and 10. The S80. Here's a really interesting old mooring minder. Now these boats date back to 1978. They were built by Rell Industries in southwestern Sydney. They're called the PR, Parramatta River 25. And they're an Adams hull. They got the mould for an Adams 26 hull and cut the back off it. And they didn't use the Adams keel. They used the keel, or mould of a keel, off a Dragon, which is a One Design, very old One Design race yacht, beautiful thing. And they've got a keel hung rudder, and this one's got the outboard on the back. And they've got a rig out of a 5.5 metre racing boat. So sails back in the late 70s, early 80s were quite easy to come by. Are a good thing. My family had one, and we had a lot of fun in it. Now you can pick these up very cheaply. They're very inexpensive. Now one of the unique features about these is that they've got a self-tacking headsail, which means that the sail at the front tacks itself when you're going to windward, and when you're zigzagging up into the breeze, they'll tack themselves, so you don't have to wrestle that sail across and pull it on with the winch. A really nice old thing. That was Saltbush Bill. It was owned by a guy called Ross Nattrass, the son of the fella that built them, the late Ray Nattrass. And yeah, you can pick those up for almost nothing through to about $5,000. I doubt you'd find one over 5,000 these days. The PR25. This is the Bombridge 27, the big brother of the Triton 24, and we've got a little 23-foot version of this as well. This has got a steering wheel and would have an inboard diesel, and you can get them cheap. There's one going at the moment for about $4,000 or $5,000, and I've owned one of those in the past, and they are a great little cruiser. I also happened to win the Sydney Harbour Regatta in my division, PHS Spinnaker, about 15 years ago, and they can get going. They really light to moderate. It's easy for me to say, and they're great to turn into more of a cruiser than a racer. This one's got the furler on it. It's a bit weathered. It needs a bit of love, but yeah, they're great things. The Bombridge 27, somewhere around the $5,000 to $15,000 mark. This is the Holland 25, rated quarter tonne under the old IOR rule from the 70s and 80s. They're another great little pocket cruiser racer. The outboard on the back, of course. Around 4 berths down below. You can pick those up cheap, around the $5,000 to $7,000 mark. They also come in a diesel with a shaft and a prop shaft and folding prop. Of course, this one obviously has a outboard on the back, and this is a great example here of the mainsail being in cruising mode. Now, those fine lines going from the boom there to the top of the mast are called lazy jacks, and they are so when you drop the mainsail, the lazy jacks keep it in place so it doesn't go falling off the side of the boom and all over the place, and you can pack it away quite easily. They're good things to have on a cruising type boat. They don't do much harm on a racing boat either, but yeah, they're a good thing to have. That's the Holland 25, designed by the famous Ron Holland, who had a huge amount of success with boats that he designed in the 70s and 80s, and he's gone on to be the designer of some super yachts. This is the Compass 29, which is the more modern variant of the Compass 28, very popular cruiser racer, another long keel boat similar to the Clansman 30. These things were very popular, built by Compass Yachts down the south of Sydney. This one is in cruising mode with a head furler. It's not in great nick, but eventually these things come on the market, and that's where you can get some bargains. You may be able to pick this one up for a couple of grand, and depending on the condition of the diesel, you clean this thing up and you've got a great little cruising boat. It's got the solar on the back there and the barbecue. Clean that up and you can have some really good fun in it. It's the Compass 29, very popular. We have a fixed keel version of the Cold 23. They come in a centerboard version, vertically lowering centerboard, but this one is a fixed keel version. They're a really neat little boat. You can pick those up for around the $5,000 to $7,000 mark. Don't let yours get like the boats I'm showing you with the mould. You've got to keep on top of that. It's got a little visitor on there doing his business. But yeah, the Cold 23 is great. They've got the outboard on the bracket at the back, transom hung rudder, and that of course is because they are a trailer starter as well, and the rudder swings up on the trail version of them. They're about 4 berths down below, and a very comfortable little pocket cruiser racer, great for twilights and a weekend away. The Cold 23, Peter Cole design. Well, this is one of my favourite little pocket cruiser racers that has been very popular throughout Australia, and they've built hundreds of these since the 1970s. They underwent a slight change under the water where they modernised the rudder a bit after about 1978, I think, but a great little boat. I've owned one of these, and they're excellent. You can pick them up cheap. There's one for sale down on Sydney Harbour at the moment for around the $2,000 mark. The outboard hangs off the back, which is very practical. You don't have to lift it out and put it away if you just want to chain it up, and it's ready to use. You just lower it into the water and away you go, rather than have to hang it onto a bracket at the back. These are 5 berth. They've got an enclosed head, which means an enclosed toilet. This one's got a furler, which makes it very easy to handle the head sail, the front sail. and they're a wonderful boat. Love the Space Sailor 24, and they have a big brother called the big sister called the Space Sailor 27, which is almost identical in terms of its proportions, just everything's a little bit bigger. This is the Clansman 30, an older design, had its origins in New Zealand, a masthead rig. They're mostly in cruising mode now, of course, but in the 60s and 70s are a very popular racing boat in Australia and New Zealand. In fact, they had inter-dominion championships where they would travel across the Tasman. Australia would go, I think, every second year to New Zealand and vice versa, and they would race in the inter-dominion championships in these things, and there was quite a number of them. They're a lovely thing. They've got a long full keel. They don't have a fin keel with a separate rudder. The rudder hangs off the back of them, which means they probably don't manoeuvre as quickly as a fin keel, and they may not go to windward into the wind quite as quick, but they do track very well off a breeze, and with anything after the quarter, these are very comfortable sea boats. And a good option, diesel engine, fixed prop, which is in an aperture behind the keel, and you can get those for as low as 10,000 bucks, probably up to about 20 nowadays, but with a bit of love, this could be a really good coastal cruiser and beyond. So this is the little Triton 24 in cruising mode. It was designed by a Qantas captain called John Alsop. He also designed the Bondbridge 215, which is also known as the Bondbridge 27. And the Triton 24, you can pick them up very cheaply. This one hasn't had a lot of love, but it has got a furler on it, and they're worth a couple of bob. And the mainsail's under a cover, so the hope is that that would be in pretty good condition. And you can find the Triton 24s, which are very voluminous boats. They've got a lot of room down below, and they're mostly the outboard option through a well at the back, as does the Endeavour 26. Goes through a well in the cockpit, and you can store it away afterwards, and that way the propeller and gearbox of the outboard doesn't get fouled by underwater growth. These have 4 or 5 berths in them, standing headroom, and they're a great entry-level boat too, and you can pick them up for as little as $1,000 up to about 5,000 or 6,000 in general. The Triton 24. Moves me on to the J24, very popular one design racer, designed in the late 70s by the Johnston brothers from the United States. They're huge around the world, probably not as big as the Etchells one design, but still a very, very price accessible way to get on the water if you want to do twilighting. This little fella here, the guy that owns that, picked it up for a couple of grand, and if you got something like that with a couple of mates, you can do really well in terms of entry-level boats for twilight racing. Not a huge amount of room down below, but they still have 4 berths. Got your little outboard on the back, and the fellow that owns this boat has chosen to leave it in a boat bag. It's around the $4,000 mark for the bag, but when you consider the cost of anti-fouling a boat, even on your own, if you pulled a 24-footer out and did the work yourself at, say, Woolwich Marina in Sydney, it would be around the $2,000 mark for the lift, the blast, the lay days, a couple of lay days, and the cost of the anti-fouling, which can be up to $400 for 4 litres. The J24, around the $1,000 mark at the bottom, up to about 5. So there you have it. I've given you some examples of some boats that you could potentially buy for very little money and do up, including mine. And I'm out here in this beautiful little autumn westerly, nice and cool, just drifting along with the headsail up, and that can be you. If you'd like some help, I can help you for just a few bucks. I can go with you and look at some boats. I'm not a surveyor, but I can definitely help you align you to your needs and wants when it comes to getting into the right boat for one of the best, if not the best, lifestyle choice you could make. See you next episode. Bye for now.